everyone. I'm your host, Chris Garris, and welcome to the Transporter Room. Today, we have a very special guest join us, Andy Holt. Andy is an actor, writer, and one hell of a super Star Trek fan. Thank you for making the time to come to the show today, Andy. How are you doing?
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for
Oh,
having me. Appreciate it.
anytime. I just want to let you know it was a pleasure getting to meet you and Bryce and everybody else at the Trek to Dallas convention back in November. You guys were just like so welcoming and just fun to hang out with, especially at breakfast and whatnot. And I just wanted to,
Yeah, thanks,
oh
Chris.
yeah,
That
and it
was
was,
fun.
and I just want to say, one thing that I will not forget was the morning I came down and got to join you guys for breakfast with Sean Kenny and his wife.
Yeah, that's right. We just by chance sat at the same table with Sean Kenny and his wife Taki. Actually, of the two mornings, Saturday and Sunday, we wound up eating breakfast with them
Oh,
both
really?
days, kind of by chance. Yeah, I think you were there one of those
It
days,
was
but
probably Saturday, I'm thinking, for me.
I think it was. And then Sunday they were there again, and we joined them at breakfast again. That was a lot of fun. So I don't know if your viewers are familiar. For those of you that may not know, Sean Kenny was in the original series of Star Trek, and his most famous role there was as Captain Pike in the wheelchair in the menagerie, in the beep beep wheelchair. I think he also played another character, a helmsman, for several episodes, I believe. I don't remember the
I
character's
don't
name.
know how many, but I do know you are correct. I have seen that he was a helmsman on different episodes of the TOS. Um, yeah, I have to admit, at first I didn't know who he was because I had not really watched at that time. I had not really watched much of TOS. I have now, so I was going to say a little bit on your background, real quick. As I was just researching and to see what I knew, you told me you were an actor back out when we were in Dallas, and I found that you were in the fan series Star Trek Continues as Fleet Admiral Nogura.
Congratulations, Jim. Completion of your 5-year mission. That's quite an achievement. Not to mention saving the galaxy.
But the price, Admiral.
Believe me, the officials responsible for the unauthorized Pandora project will be dealt with.
And that was our first time to see him. Probably the only time, if I'm not mistaken, actually. But we've heard his name before, and I didn't get to watch the whole series, but I watched that last episode, and I need to go back and watch the whole series because just that last episode, it almost felt like, and I'm going to use a Star Wars reference, it almost felt like Rogue One leading into episode 4, you know, because we're getting
Yes,
the,
yes, that's a good analogy. I never heard that one analogy before, but that's probably a good one. Since you're watching TOS right now, I would highly suggest finish watching all of the TOS and then watch Star Trek Continues from the beginning. There's 11 episodes. They each one is the same length as the original series episode, and they even put those weird little breaks in there that looks like you put that's where the commercial goes. You might want to watch the animated series in between those because there's no reference to them, but the intention for the animated series was that that would be like the fourth season of TOS, and there are references to that animated series things later on, especially in like in
oh
lower
yeah,
decks.
big time in lower
Yeah,
decks.
but TOS, yes, but Star Trek continues. That being in that show was the singular highlight of my Star Trek fandom. And this is from a guy who's met a lot of the stars. I had my chest signed by William Shatner That's another whole story. Um, yes, I didn't ask him
Oh, he
to do
just
it.
did it.
He just did it. Yes. So so being in continues was yeah, that was the greatest fan moment for me probably ever.
Oh,
Star
I'd
Trek.
imagine because, like I said, I just what little bit the one I watched today, I can't. I'm looking forward to going back because I mean that was a full production. Like they put everything into that, and I looked at some of the names, the actors and stuff, but then I looked at some of the names in the the crew. I'm like, John Knoll was one of the visual effects artists in that, and he did Star Wars. He does Star Wars, or he's at ILM.
The 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 cast and crew is amazing. If you look at the guest star list on continues, it's like these are real people, real actors. A lot of them are sci-fi legends that are on there. It's pretty
June
amazing.
Lockhart was on there. You had Michael
Yeah,
Dorn, Marina. Obviously, I saw them. Those are some of the ones that stuck out to me, and there were some others, but I
yeah. Lou
yes,
Ferrigno was
the
on
Hulk.
there. John DeLance.
Yes, John.
Um, um, yeah, Michael Forrest was in the very first episode, and he played. You may not have watched it yet, but he played Apollo in the original series, and he reprised his role for continues.
Wow, they really
Yeah,
did put a lot of work into this.
yeah. I've had I had a friend tell me that when when he watched the original series, some episodes were good, some weren't. He's much younger, and but he said when he watched continues, all the episodes were good. So he being younger, I think like you said, watching original series through the lens of today is sometimes difficult because of the poor special effects, the overacting. But continues did not come across like that. It did have the flavor of the original series, but didn't seem to have any of that 60s
No, I
baggage, I
mean,
guess.
I
I don't know how
think
to
there
say
was still at least one or two scenes where they did the, the lighted on the eyes of Captain Kirk. you know, they had to do that because if you don't, that's not TOS. If you don't do it, um,
Yeah, yeah, they did have to keep some of the elements to make it original series, to the elements that define the
and
original
that's what
series.
as I've been watching it, and when we discuss it every now and then after we're done watching them, some of the episodes are still they're all good, well, they're all decent and very good most of the time, but then there's those few that um you know that we watched and it was like, oh, that's that hasn't aged well, you know there's a few of them, but still, after we've discussed them and talked about it, I'm like, okay, that's they had to do it that way because in the episode I'm thinking about was Friday's Child, and where Bones decides to hit a pregnant woman, and when I'm first at first reaction to it, you're like, what? But I was talking to somebody else I interviewed, and he actually explained it again, and I recalled after watching it, it was that's what she respected actually and expected.
It was yes, it was an interpretation of a cultural aspect of that race that they were trying to
Correct.
convey.
Yes, it is. And so I'm over it. We watched it. It actually ended up being okay, and it was not a bad episode when it was all said and done. But it's just you've got those ones that you're just like, okay, you get it. It was the '60s, and that's just the way it was. And we'll get a little bit more into some of the when we get farther into the series and the movies and whatnot. But the one of the biggest questions I personally have had for you, and I think I might have asked this back at breakfast one morning, but is how many conventions have you attended? I just saw you at STSF. Prior to that was Dallas that I know of. So those are two. And I swear it's a lot longer list.
Yeah, I think. I tried to count. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think I roughly attend maybe 8 a year. Um, not all of them are Star Trek, but I try to attend all the Star Trek conventions that I reasonably can. And then recently, Creation, the company that has been putting them on, has been doing a lot more because for a long time they were doing only they call it STLV, Las Vegas. My friends call it, and we all call it Star Trek Live. And so they were only doing Star Trek Live, and then this past year they started. They did the Dallas. We went to one, Nashville. I know they did one in New Jersey and Chicago also, which we did not go to those two. And then they did the San Francisco. And this coming year, there's several more also. So I also attend several other conventions. I pretty much always go to San Diego Comic Con, WonderCon, several local ones here also. And my wife and we've been doing roughly 8 a year for probably at least the last 10 or
Okay,
12 years
so
or
you've been
so.
doing it for a while then. As much as I would love to go to STLV this year, I'm not going to be able to for work commitments. But 2026, I should be there. That's my plan at right now. And so, and everybody I talk to, and I suspect you'd be the same, but everyone says you have to do STLV at least once.
Yes, I would. Well, I would actually rephrase that and say you have to do STLV
Well,
every year.
true. I'll go. I'll give you that.
Yeah. So, but that's my
Hmm.
personal philosophy. So, but yes, we I don't. I think we started attending in 2013, and we actually haven't
Oh
missed one.
wow,
So we've been very fortunate.
dang.
Yeah, you should do the Star Trek
Are you
cruise,
going on the one next
which
month
is coming up
or
in
the end of this month?
yes, yes. It's in roughly about 2 weeks from now. Less than, yeah, 2 weeks from now I'll be on the cruise. But that's another one that we do every year, and I think we've done every one ever since the first one started in like
That sounds about
2017,
right.
October.
I have a buddy on here, TJ Jackson Bay, and he swears by the cruise. I think he's kind of like you. He does not he goes on the cruises. He tries not to miss them. He loves the cruise. And everybody else that I've talked to, I've got other members and friends that have said the same thing. They're like, you need to do a cruise. So what do you like about on the cruise? Like what is it that, makes it I don't want to say better because they're all fun, but everyone I do talk to that has done the cruises, they just seem to like them better than the land conventions for
Really, I don't know if I like it
yeah, and that may
better.
not be the
I
right
mean,
way
I'm
of
more.
saying it, but it's more I don't know, they just have a lot more fun at times on the cruise.
Um, I don't know if I have more fun, less fun. I have fun in all of them. I get on the boat that first day, and I swear I blink, and then oh my god, we got to get off the boat already. It's I swear there's a space time anomaly when we go on these things, and then they seem to go much faster than normal space time. So that's the way I guess I could explain it to Trekkies. Um, and yeah, there are a lot more shows and a lot more, much more entertainment type events. I think on the cruise that interest me. As in addition to, you don't need to think about what you're going to eat because all the food is included. So that's kind of nice. If you're on a land convention, you kind of have to figure out every meal. It's not a horrible thing, of course. But if you're talking about, you mentioned being at the bar and seeing the stars just hanging out there. It's even more so on a boat where nobody can leave. So they're trapped there with you, and you see them all the time. I'm in the elevators with them very often, walking down the hall, seeing them, and I've been to so many conventions that a lot of them actually know me. he'll recognize me because I've seen
Oh, I
him so
bet.
many times.
And
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Is that your electronic dog that was at the convention last couple weeks ago, or is that somebody else's dog?
Yes, that's my dog. It's canine. It's for those of you that may not be familiar. I have a walking canine, and he actually drives. It's from the dog from Doctor Who that I built a few years ago, and I installed a remote control device so that I can drive him around. I have a device where I can drive him with one hand, and I don't even have to look at it, and I can have my hand down at my side, so he'll just be driving along in front of me, and I can people can't even tell that I'm driving him. It's pretty
That's
cool.
cool. Did you have him in Dallas? I don't remember it, but
I did not have him in Dallas. I've never flown anywhere with that dog. If I bring the dog, it has to be somewhere I
okay.
can drive to.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
it's big. Yeah, he's
He's a big
big.
dog.
Um, yes, he's a big dog, but so he's attended several Star Trek conventions, and he's had a lot of fun.
Well, I noticed that, and I think you changed uniforms almost had a different uniform per day almost.
I think I probably wear about um, between two and three different cosplays a day, actually. So yes, yeah, I tend to change them often, and I think for that 3 day convention, I'm pretty sure I brought at least
Oh,
nine
that's cool.
outfits.
And I do
Um,
remember the hat that you
yeah,
had on.
yes, that is um, a Spock helmet, and then so when Star Trek started gaining popularity, and then toy manufacturers wanted to put out merchandise. At first, they didn't really have anything, so some manufacturer decided, oh well, here's a white helmet with this siren on top of it. Let's slap Spock's name on it and Star Trek label on the box and sell this as a licensed Star Trek product to kids. So that's what they sold, and it's been since then been known as the Spock helmet. It's tiny, it fits a child's head. So I made my own. I modified somebody's 3D print file and made my own for to wear. And I think I've probably made about 20 of these things since then. I've given them out to many friends. I even made one for my canine dog, and so he wore that to the last convention. So my canine had a Spock helmet, and then on top of my canine, I put a Moopsie that I had built. So for those of you that may not know, Moopsie was a small animal, a character from Lower Decks. And so I scratch built a Moopsie that could walk and talk. And then I built a helmet for Moopsie also. And then I put Moopsie on the back of K9, and he just rode around on K9 through the convention. So all three of us had helmets.
Oh, that is so cool. I'm gonna have to have you send if you have any video of that. I'm gonna have you send it to me.
I need to. I know I have
Okay.
stills. I'm not sure that I should have taken video of that, and I'm not sure that I did.
Well, that's cool.
There we
I
go.
do remember seeing some stuff online. Let me put that solo. There it is. There's K9. Ah,
Yeah, and there's K9 with his helmet, with Moopsie on his back, and Moopsie has
ha!
a helmet too.
That is so freaking cool. Awesome. Really cool. Oh man, that's awesome. Oh, That's so cool. Uh, well, I'm gonna get into some of the, look, we've already started talking about the Star Trek, obviously, but I just, what first drew you into Star Trek, into Trek in general?
Oh, that's a good question. Gee, I need to dig back into my memory banks. And so I'm old enough to have watched Star Trek in syndication during the 70s, and I always liked it. I don't know how deeply I was into it. I watched, I watched the 1979 motion picture in the theater. I watched Wrath of Khan in the theater, but at the time I watched Khan, I don't remember that, like you were saying, I don't remember Space Seed. I didn't watch Space Seed prior to Khan, and I don't think I watched all the original series episodes until way later. I always enjoyed it. I was This was back, back when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s. I was that stereotypical nerdy kid. I was really good in school academically, but was kind of not athletic. I never was into sports. So, all those movies that you see in the 80s where you have all these different cliques and stereotypes in high school, that was probably largely accurate. And I was definitely the nerdy kid. And somehow that in the last, I would say sometime in the last 15 or 20 years, being nerdy all of a sudden became cool. And nowadays, all the, you know, former jocks and everything, everybody are learning that sci-fi is cool and they're really into it. I have a flux capacitor in my car, and I remember when I brought it to a tire shop to get my tires changed, all the guys came out and looked at it, and they were all really impressed, and they thought it was really cool. But there was a time, probably 20-ish years ago, when I was in at work in the professional setting. I didn't talk about Star Trek. I didn't let people know that I was into it. I hid it because it came across as weird, and I was such a crazy diehard fan that I didn't really want people to know. But nowadays, my coworkers go out of their way to ask me about it, to talk about like continues, and then there's been a handful of times when somebody sees me on TV or something, and then they'll ask me about it. So it's
It
different
is
now.
different.
It's really weird. It's different.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious. What is your favorite series? Is it TOS?
Hmm. That's a good question, and
And it's a loaded question. I
it
know that
is.
as well.
It is. I think I'm having a hard. I always have a hard time answering that one because I think to me it's a toss up between TOS and Next Gen. I am hard pressed to choose between the two to say which one is my favorite. I actually like almost all of the. I call it slightly older stuff from Enterprise on back. I love all that stuff. From Discovery on, I think I have mixed reviews on all those shows. But I love the original series just because, if for no other reason than that's where it all started. I love Next Gen, again, if for no other reason, because it kept the TV side of the franchise alive, right? It was such a unique thing to think um, in 1987, we're going to put Star Trek back on TV. It had been almost 20 years um, since it had gone off the air, and all of a sudden there's a new Star Trek TV show, right? There have been some movies. There have been the original series. There have been several movies, but then TV again. That was a monumental thing to happen for Trek fans, And then Deep Space Nine after that, Voyager after that was good. It was cool, but it wasn't as huge of an impact to the franchise as Next
Well,
Gen
yeah,
was.
and see, I didn't get to watch TOS, so TNG was my first series to actually watch in '87 when it came out. And I still to this day I remember the opening scene of the Enterprise D. That flying scene, and you're like, okay, this is a new Enterprise, but it was cool. I had not being someone had watched TOS. I mean, I've seen the movies and all that.
You didn't have preconceived
Correct. I
ideas.
didn't have
Yeah, you were part of the newer audience they were bringing
correct.
in.
So obviously we got the series. Which of all the movies do you have one that's your preferred, or are they all kind of equal?
Oh, I definitely have my preferences, I think. Um, Again, somewhat of a loaded question. I'm going to give you a long answer. The motion picture wasn't my favorite, but again, um, because of how huge of a deal it was in bringing back the franchise, that one was a really, really big deal. Wrath of Khan was arguably, I think most people would say, one of the best, if not the best, Star Trek movie ever made. Everybody seems to love that one. Nobody says anything really negative about that one. Everybody loves that one. Ricardo Montalban is, again, arguably the best cinematic villain of all time, sci-fi or not. Um, and so he really, really, really gave that movie credibility. Everybody loves, what Trekkies call the one with the whales, Star Trek 4. Even though when you really dissect the plot, it is crazy asinine. Um, but it's perhaps more of a character driven movie, and everybody just loves whales. So, but and another one I think the Trekkies all love is First Contact. That was just a well-made movie in so many ways, and it brought back the Borg, and everybody loved the Borg as the villains, and so that was probably the height of the, the Borg's power as a villain in the franchise, right? So that movie was just so good in so
Oh, it
many
was a
ways.
great movie.
So
I mean, I loved it.
yeah, it brought back the Borg, but it also told the story of First Contact is the namesake. So it was very it didn't it was two very different events, but they seem to flow together because usually if a movie doesn't stay in its lane, it doesn't work. But that one seemed to just work so well.
Well, it was a great. Well, obviously you had the TNG cast, as we always have, but then they had a great. You mean, oh my God, James Cromwell and um, Alfred Witter, Alfred. Oh my God, Woodward, and I mean that's a great. Those two right there are great actors and actresses. So it was they had a good cast for that one. They really pulled him up, pulled it in, and I think it helped. I'm not gonna lie, the Zephyr Cochrane character being kind of a drunk, and it just and it gave it.
It gave a very real dimension to what they would consider a historic character. It was very also very real because if you look through history, that's all these a lot of these historic type people were
Yeah,
just real people.
well, and also you have to think about it. It also shows you what and a vision of what humanity will be after a global nuclear war as well. So it. Oof, I mean, I don't want one of those, but it shows you, how they did come together, and were able to, well, and of course Cochrane, he says, he didn't do it to get statues and all that. He did it for the money, but in the end, it all worked out, and then we had, we got the NX program, and another thing that I liked about, and I loved how they did that tie-in to Enterprise when that Borg episode on Enterprise, because of the when the sphere crashed on Earth, and so that was a great tie-in to the movie.
That one actually worked well because the whole Enterprise series was an afterthought, of course. It was kind of shoehorned into the timeline, and in a lot of ways it didn't fit because of course none of the previous series referenced them, and but timeline wise, of course, it happened before all of that. But overall, it was still well done. I mean, as much as you could shoehorn a series into this
Yeah,
timeline, it
especially a
was well done.
prequel. And so it was, yeah, I thought they did a
Yes.
decent job of that. And so, I mean, uh, yeah, I enjoyed it. And so, I guess, one thing I would ask about like, Star Trek and the visions that it has created and shaped, our hope for the future, do you think, in your opinion, that humanity will ever even remotely come close to the Star Trek version of humanity?
I am. I consider myself to be an optimist, and so the short answer is yes. I do. I do believe that humanity will reach the ideals that we see in Star Trek. It won't look like Star Trek because you know in Star Trek every alien looks like a human in cosplay, and I don't think that that's what they'll be like. But I think a lot of it will be a lot of those aspects will be there, and I think we in today's day and age are on the edge of a of a society um, of that will be able to provide goods and services at a tremendously low cost. And I'm going to bring up some non sci-fi thoughts. We are developing, we as a society are developing AI and robotic technology to the point where you can go online and use ChatGPT. I don't know if you've used it. It is an amazing tool. It is extremely usable, and the intelligence behind it is pretty staggering. I mean, if you even today, I think it's still very much like a sci-fi type of tool. And if you were to say five, even just a handful of years ago, that we would have something like this for everybody to use, people would think you're just full of it. But when we take this AI and we marry it with robotics technology, we're going to develop robots and androids and devices that are going to be able to build things for us very cheaply. Factory labor will likely be a thing of the past. Um, the service industry will likely be a thing of the past. And I actually believe that within our lifetimes, we will be served in most restaurants by robots and AI. And in the future, I think in our lifetimes, we will go into a fancy restaurant, and only the fancy restaurants are going to have human waiters. And these people will be highly trained, and these will be coveted jobs, and these people will actually have to compete to become a waiter in a restaurant. And all the other restaurants are just going to be robots. And we've seen this in the past 100 years ago, little over 100 years ago. Everybody was riding a horse, and only rich people had cars. Today, um, everybody has cars. Only rich people have horses. But also today, um, everybody that has a lower job works in the restaurant. No offense to anybody, but this is perhaps a stereotype. In the future, uh, only those very high end people will be working in the restaurant, and all the other restaurants will be operated by robots. That's what I
Well, and I have to say you're right about like the AI. You asked, about you talk about Chat GPT, and I will sometimes, depend upon what I'm doing, I'll have Chat GPT up, I'll have Grok up on, and I will put the same, you know, statement or whatever I'm trying to get help with in both products and see who comes up with a better, answer or, a wording. And it's interesting. For me personally, what I have found is if it's a more of a technical question, Grok seems to do that better. But if I'm writing like an email or something, I say, polish this up. ChatGPT seems to be really good at writing emails, but it's just so fun. And that's a very good point. I mean, if you look at the robots, the Tesla bot and the ones that Boston Dynamic have developed, I mean, we're not. I mean, I think we're a handful of years, but not that much from having robots like they were like in the movie I, Robot with Will Smith. And
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken,
Well, I think yeah, Tesla and Musk are deliberately designing the robots to look like that. I think they perhaps even got inspiration from that movie.
oh, absolutely.
So, yeah,
And it's just a matter of time. And
yeah.
I don't know the cost, but I swear I've heard rumors that they really want to make those, the Tesla bots
I think he already
affordable.
announced that he intends to have it cost $30,000 or less for the first ones, which is affordable. If you bought a robot and you could have him do the dishes and wash your car and do the vacuuming and all those other menial tasks, it's not that
Well,
much
and
money,
to
really.
think about what it could do in the event of a medical emergency with you at home, if someone's at home, if it,
That's interesting. Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true. It could take the place of first
well,
responder
maybe
too.
not
That is a
completely
good
take
point.
it, but if you like,
Not completely, but perhaps it could do
oh yeah,
CPR. In
or
those
do
cases, right?
something to protect. Yeah, that's wow. That's a man. We're
Yeah.
getting deep here tonight, but which
I
is
know.
good, and
I know.
I
So
like that. And so, and I guess really my last question, because we're trying to get a little long here, is and again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but and we're already touching on this, but is what Star Trek technology do you wish existed today?
what Star Trek technology do I wish existed today? Um, okay, so I don't think we'll ever develop transporters that can transport people. I don't think that will ever happen. Um, I don't think there's a realistic way. There's a couple of them which I would love to see, which I'm not convinced it'll happen in our lifetimes. One is the ability for anti gravity, right? So if we had anti gravity available, then we could theoretically control aspects of gravity through the use of energy. Then we could put things into orbit much, much cheaper. That would enable spaceflight to not have to burn crazy amounts of fossil fuel. And then the second thing would be something equivalent to a warp drive, faster than light technology, which would allow us to actually get out of our solar system to other uh, planetary systems in a realistic time frame, right? So those two, they probably kind of have to go side by side because without anti gravity, and if you try to go to light speed, you just might get turned into a puddle of goo on the back wall of the spaceship.
Very
So
true.
that's where the whole inertial dampeners things come in, right?
Gotta love those script
So we
items.
probably need both.
True.
Yeah,
And I agree.
yeah.
You
So I would love to see that. I'm not convinced that those will happen in our lifetimes, but I think a society where scarcity is a thing of the past. That is
mhm.
within our lifetime.
Well, and I think, as you were talking about, faster than light travel, it is theoretically doable. They've thought, there's theories that will allow now.
There is it's theoretically possible, but the energy consumption required is astronomical. It would take more energy than we have generated in the history of mankind, kind of thing, right? So though it's not realistic that it
It's
could
not
happen.
realistic yet.
So
On
yeah,
paper,
yeah,
they can make it work, but they just need, like the energy of the
yeah,
sun times like a million or something to power it.
yeah. Some number that's
Ridiculous.
not possible.
Exactly.
But scarcity, I think, in fact, I think I honestly believe I study history. I'm a big history nut. So I honestly believe that even scarcity today, most poverty or famine is caused by um, oppressive governments or lack of proper logistics, right? Because I don't think we as a species are not we have enough resources for everybody. So most of the time when people don't have the resources, it's government, it's bad government, or bad logistics, uh, just not having the means to get the resources to the right people, or a combination of both. So we're already on the edge of being able to solve things like world hunger, um, lots of diseases. We're already diseases don't really plague us like they did a few hundred
True.
years ago. It's very very
I mean, and and to have that, yeah, you're right. It just we're getting there, and we just have just it's just more time, and we will continue to advance. And at some point, we will have, I mean, someone made a comment about replicators, and that would absolutely, if we had the ability to do something to make those, you end world hunger overnight.
we have rudimentary replicators. They're called 3D printers. They don't make food. Well, some of them actually. I think some cutting edge ones do, but it's not cheap. It's not cost efficient. But essentially, a 3D printer is a rudimentary replicator when you look
I
at
know. And so
it.
it's just a matter of time, and we'll get there. Again, will it be in either of our lifetimes? Who knows? But I mean, uh, we'll see. Something will happen, and I just hope it's all in the positive for us. And that
I agree. I'm optimistic about it.
me too. All right. Well, Andy, I thank you for your time tonight and for hopping on with me and just chatting about everything Star Trek and non Star Trek, and just it's just I'm enjoying doing this. It's everybody I get to talk to. I do learn something new every time, and also it makes me think. I'm like, man, I didn't think about that. And so again, that's one of the reasons why I started doing this, and I'm gonna just keep on doing it. And it's just fun. It's fun. So I appreciate it, and hopefully I will get to see you at STLV 26 or maybe the Chicago convention this year. If they don't come to Dallas or Texas, I'm probably going to go to that one.
I'm going to look into that one. I think we're going to try
Cool.
to go. We'll see, but we might
All
try to
right.
go that one.
Well, I will let you go, and it was fun talking, and I will talk to you soon.
For as little as $5 per month, you can gain early access to the full ad-free versions of all interviews, plus additional exclusive content by joining Patreon.